Hi, third graders. Welcome back. Today we are finishing, if you can believe it, the case of the gasping garbage. And today we're going to focus on comparing and contrasting. So when we compare things, we see how they're alike. When we contrast them, we see how they're different. So I want you to be thinking about the characters in the story, the main characters, which are Nell and Drake. Think about how they're alike, how they're different. And then there's going to be an activity for you to do in Google Classroom today. Before we start, I wonder if you could be thinking about this question. What is Lily's reaction? Remember Lily? She's the tiniest girl in the 5th grade. What's her reaction when she's presented or given the results of the experiment? Remember when we last left off in the last chapter, they knew who that mystery letter was from. Remember, we've found our man, they said. So let's look back in yesterday's chapter. Right here is a picture of Lily. Now you can see how tiny she is because that phone is giant compared to her head. We talked a little bit about how the author used her words really small when she was speaking because she's a tiny little person. We also pointed out these parentheses. Remember, I said that I like to call them hugs. Those are around some words. We use them a lot in math. And in this instance, it kind of draws attention to those words. And it's kind of like it was saying, somebody maybe might be whispering or something, kind of like a side conversation. And then we talked about point of view. And there was a narrator telling us the story, but the narrator referred a lot to Drake. So this was from Drake's perspective. This was how he saw, right, what was happening in the story when he went to get ink pens from everybody, right? Baloney sat on him and wasn't the nicest kid. So that's from Drake's perspective. That's how he sees him. He said he stays away from him usually. Okay, so here we are, the last chapter. It's called Desperate Measures. Meanwhile, Lily Crump waited at her house and waited and waited. Why don't they call, she thought. She wrung her hands. That means just to kind of rub them back and forth. She paced back and forth. She stared out the window. You see, Lily Crump was lonely. She had no brothers or sisters. She didn't even have a cat or dog. All she had was an itty-bitty fish with buggy eyes. So when the phone finally rang, Lily leaped to answer. Hello? Her heart was pounding. So that must be her fish friend. Can you see his buggy eyes or her buggy eyes? It means they're popping out. Lily? Lily recognized Drake's voice. Yes. We've got your answer, Miss Crump. Come to the lab immediately. I'll be right there, squeaked Lily. Remember they said her voice was squeaky? Lily was true to her word. Within 5 minutes, she arrived. I ran the whole way, she gasped. Now tell me before I die. Who is it? Who is in love with me? Drake pushed up his glasses. He does that so often. Observe, he said, pointing to the strips of paper. Inks are not all the same. Certainly not, agreed Nell. An ink may look black, said Drake. Or blue, added Nell. But they are in fact made of many different colors. Nell and I separated the colors in a process called chromatography. It's quite elementary. That means simple, young. It's quite elementary, really. As alcohol moves through the ink, the different colors separate. That's because, Nell explained, the different colors do not have the same weight. They move faster or slower, depending on how heavy they are. She pointed at the strips of paper with her long wooden pointer. As you can see, each ink is like a fingerprint. All we had to do was match the ink in the letter with the ink in the finished strips, finished Drake proudly. And each strip is carefully labeled, so we know whose pen it was. I like that it said he finished proudly. So he's proud of his findings, of their research, right, and how they came up with the answer. And? Asked Lily, her eyes wide. Whose was it? Who wrote me the letter? Drake and Nell glanced at each other. Drake swallowed hard. The science of love was proving to be quite a challenge. You tell her, he said. Nell took a deep breath. Miss Crump, I think you'd better sit down. Ooh, it sounds to me they're going to deliver some terrible news to her. Lily sat. She could hardly wait. It was baloney, Nell finally blurted. Bubba Baloney Mahoney. Do you remember him? If we look at that picture, there he is. They said he was the biggest boy in 5th grade. Doesn't look like he's very kind either. Suddenly, there was a silence, a deep silence, a deep, dark silence, a deep, dark, dreadful silence. A silence rather like when you've just found out that your favorite football team has been beaten 85-0. Or perhaps when your teacher tells you that, yes, your assignment was due today. Look at, there are those parentheses again, right? Kind of like whispering or having a side conversation, giving you a little bit more information. Drake couldn't stand it any longer. He shook Lily's shoulders. Snap out of it, he ordered. Lily didn't respond. Instead, she slid off the stool like a wet noodle and fell to the floor. Oh, they're comparing Lily to a wet noodle. Can you picture like a spaghetti noodle that's been cooked? Drake was desperate. He knew that if he didn't do something soon, Lily might go into shock. After that, a coma. After that, well, he knew that whatever it was, it would be quite awful. Quick, Scientist Nell, hollered Drake. Pour a beaker of water over Miss Crump's head. There's not a second to lose. 400 milliliters should do the trick. Check. Sploosh. Splutter. Dazed and drowned, Lily stared at them. Her hair dangled in limp, soggy strings like a wet mop that hadn't yet been wrung out. Speak, ordered Drake. Oh, baloney, Lily said. She clasped her hands together. Huh? Drake and Nell looked at her in astonishment. They sound surprised. Listen to how she responded. Oh, baloney. Thank you, Detective Drake and Scientist Nell. Thank you. This is the happiest day of my life. Lily gave each of them a teeny tiny hug. Drake returned the love letter along with a business card. Call us anytime. Oh, I will, Lily said. Then she flew out of the room as fast as her little legs could carry her. So I'm thinking, if she responds and says she'll call them anytime, she must have been happy with the results, right? And they must have done a really good job and been very accurate and thorough in their investigation. After she was gone, Nell shook her head. There are some things science can't explain. Indeed, Scientist Nell, Drake said. Indeed. That evening, Drake wrote in his lab notebook, Love letter mystery solved. Baloney, the culprit. The culprit is the person who did it or committed the crime. Don't understand this thing called love. A mystery. Received 1 fish with buggy eyes as payment. Must return in 1 week. Paid in full. So here's a picture of them in the laboratory. Right here, she's dumping the water on her. Sploosh, right? You can see the water droplets, and she's sitting in a puddle. There, her hands are clasped. She doesn't look upset, does she? She's really excited. They are shocked, right? Remember how I said to you, in the text, they use that teeny tiny font. That's what we call that when she's speaking, because she's teeny tiny. So the author did that to prove a point. The author also put some words in those parentheses to kind of draw attention to it. How do you think Drake's notebook? Let me look on page, let's see, 57, right? He scribbled this. Received 1 fish with buggy eyes as payment. Must return in 1 week, right? How do you think That kind of builds on information we learned at the beginning of the chapter. Thinking about, what does this payment tell you a little bit about Lily's character? She's paying them by giving them her fish, but they have to return it in a week. I think it says she's generous, right? We're talking about character traits in the past. She's generous. She's sharing her fish, who she loves, right? But they have to give it back because she's not giving it away. So it's like a beloved fish. It's something that's so important to her, but she's so grateful that they solved the mystery of who her secret admirer was. So then they have to give it back, but that's how she paid them. One thing I want to point out, and I said this the other day, at the end of these books are some really cool things you can do. These are activities and experiments for people like you, super scientists. You're learning about fossils and archaeologists and paleontologists right now. So you can be a scientist too. You can do your own laboratory. Here's what a good lab notebook contains. Right? Here's method to their madness, how they go about things. Oh, here's Mr. Tallberg's famous bread recipe, right? Remember the one at the very beginning that was in the garbage can? He was a good baker. So they give us all the ingredients to make the bread. So remember, when you go on the Realize Reader, either the app or you connect through Google Classroom, you should connect through Google Classroom first. You'll have all this information at the end. So you'll be able to write down that bread recipe. Ooh, how to send a secret message. That sounds fun. Here's about saving the frogs, lots of information to help animals. So all the chapters have lots of cool information. Oh, here's the one. Here's what they did, how they suspended that paper. Remember I said suspended means to hang from something. So they wrapped it around all the pens. And then at the end, here's how they found out. These were those beakers or those test tubes. These two were the perfect matches. So they figured it out, and they give you all their tips and tricks in the back of this story. Okay, here's the frog. So thinking back to comparing and contrasting, right? We know that characters in a book are motivated to do certain things, and we've learned a lot about that. But let's kind of compare, maybe not always the characters. Let's compare maybe the theme of the stories. We had 4 different stories, right? Maybe we could compare the plot. So the information, like what's happening in the story. We could even compare the settings in the story. How are they alike and how are they different, right? So if I'm thinking about the settings, that's kind of the easy one. That's the when and the where things take place, right? The laboratory always seems to show up. But one time they were at Gabby's house, right, in one of the stories. One time they were at Lily's house in one of the stories, and maybe even the school. So even though it's the same characters, they're solving a problem. Things are alike, but yet there are some new things at the same time. Let's think about the theme. Remember, we've talked about theme before. You learned that a few weeks ago. I said to remember like a birthday party theme. It's usually one word, maybe a couple of words, like a Lego-themed birthday party or a unicorn-themed birthday party. What do you think the author's trying to teach you in some of these chapters? Like maybe the one that we just read, right? A teeny tiny case. What do you think they might be trying to teach us? First of all, it's about science, right? They give us some interesting science facts. So I think all of the chapters have science information. I think they all talk about friendship, maybe their friendship with Lily, their friendship together, Drake and Nell. Maybe they always talk about hard work that pays off, right? They work really hard, and then in the end, they're able to solve the mysteries, okay? Maybe in a different chapter, it's not about working hard, it's about getting the job done and following through. So we can compare and contrast characters, right? And obviously we can see how they're different, a boy and a girl, right? That's kind of an obvious one. How are they alike? They're both really curious. They're both really into science and they want to get the facts right. Okay? How are they different besides being a boy and a girl? Well, she loves coffee. We know that. She's a naturalist. We know that. He likes to solve problems and have discoveries. Remember, he's trying to figure out how to make cheese not stinky anymore. So while they do things together and have a good friendship, they also are unique in their own ways. So today you've got a compare and contrast activity, and I want you to think, how are things the same and how are they different?